doing that, I was face to face with it. It was holding me by my throat, and it felt like it was sucking something out of me.
I probably should have been more scared than I was when I witnessed the exorcism.
I turned and looked on my right side. When I did, there's a beam on the side of the tree, a large beam. It's looking at me and I'm looking at it.
After I hit the lock button and looked back up, I saw red eyes staring back at me.
That they're going to show multiple gods all over the earth, be able to speak in people's languages, and at that point, it kind of converge into this one entity, which will be revealed as extraterrestrial. You'll realize that aliens are the gods of old, and at that point, it'll wipe religion out of the context of humanity.
No, it couldn't have been a person, I know that. I know that people can't run through the woods like that.
So this thing comes into view, and I see it. It's 50 yards away from me. It's walking on two legs. It's huge. This is a big, hairy-looking being.
Welcome. I'm your host, and this is uNcomfortable. Welcome back to the show, my friends. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it featured on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. Most importantly, please share the show with others and make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you can. That's the main way you can help in getting the show out in front of more people. I'd just like to take a moment to say thanks to everyone who stopped by the booth during the Ohio Bigfoot Conference over the weekend of the 6th. It was a great time, as was expected. Got to rub elbows with a lot of you, and it was truly a pleasure. I've got a couple of shout-outs here that I'd like to get out. First, I'm still nursing on some Hoosier apple brandy that was generously sent to me by Mr. Alan Bishop down at Spirits of French Lick Distillery down in southern Indiana. A nice glass of that is how I've been winding down my evenings as of late. But I have to say, to start my day, I've had the pleasure of sitting down to my morning cup of coffee, courtesy of Mr. Troy Birch of the Into the Abyss podcast. Into the Abyss is a scripted horror podcast that Troy has been working on. I've listened to a couple of his episodes, and if you're into horror, I encourage you to head over and check it out. It's very well done, and it's very apparent that he puts a lot of time into his production. That being said, the side gig for this guy, he sells coffee, and he was nice enough to send me a bag of his espresso blend. Quite honestly, it's a great way to start the day. If you haven't yet picked up the Discord server link, make sure to do that in the show notes. Hard dates on the release of Patreon and Bigfoot and Brews will be announced this month, so keep your ears open for that. And I guess if you're ready, let's get into the topic of sleep paralysis. This gentleman reached out to me a short time after having appeared on AI, Appalachian Intelligence. He had been on there, and then a little bit of time went by, and I was actually on their show. And I remember listening to his episode. I was quite drawn into the content that they were talking about. It's always been something that interested me to a strange degree. I'm not sure where my head lies in the subject of this, but I'm not going to give it away. So I am going to ask you to welcome tonight's guest, Mr. Joel. I'm not sure if you want your last name used or not.
That's fine.
Joel Pharr. He's a chef by trade, a culinary master. But he's dealt with to a large degree, he's dealt with sleep paralysis a number of times. Joel, how this is such a, I'm a very forward thinking, science based mind. So I'm really accepting of a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of different explanations to things. But a lot of my thoughts are rooted in science and what can be proved. They say they can prove that sleep paralysis is something that occurs in the body when the body is in a state of muscle atonia. And basically it's a natural and normal occurrence that during certain stages of sleep, the muscles atonia, the brain signals the muscles to relax and become temporarily paralyzed. And that is a natural way of keeping the body from inflicting harm on itself during the acting out of dreams. And, potentially harming themselves or their sleeping companion or, their pet or stuff like that. But at times, for whatever reason, there seems to be a switch that doesn't get flip-flopped when it should. And in many of those cases, the paralyzation that occurs can happen either just prior to falling asleep, like right before you go into that REM state, or it doesn't make the switch once you're coming out of the REM state. And your mind becomes awake, but your body is still asleep. And to me, when you look at that's a very, it makes a lot of sense to me. It explains to me why this would happen. But many aspects of sleep paralysis are things that have been attributed to, especially in the way back early years of people, experiencing demonic oppression or possession. And then very similar things are reported by people who have had alien abductions and things like that. So where do you fall in all this? What are your experience and what happened? And what are your beliefs on it? What are your thoughts?
At first, I didn't know what to make of it because, the first ones I had were really before internet was out or popular or, had a lot of things about, supernatural or sleep paralysis or whatever. I'd always heard them called the night terrors. But, a little bit of everything makes sense, kind of. It's kind of like trying to disprove something and, you're like, some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. It all kind of, falls together. But I've always said that I wonder if people who claim that they have been, had alien visitation or anything like that was because of sleep paralysis. Because sometimes it's extremely vivid, very real. You wake up and you have to sit there and think for a minute, did what just happened really happen? But
which is interesting. Is interesting. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that you say that point of it, because a lot of what I've read about it does seem to happen in conjunction with lucid dreaming. And lucid dreaming are dreams that are extremely, extremely vibrant, very realistic, and in many times the person having those lucid dreams are aware that they are actually dreaming.
Yeah. Most of mine, I've been fully aware. The three main ones, which we'll get into, I was very aware that I was in some sort of dream state. And even the lucid dreams that I have had that were not scary, I guess you could say. When you come out of them, you're still scared. You're petrified. Just, I guess, because of how lucid it was. And it's, for probably a good 5 minutes, you just lay in bed and you are just absolutely terrified to do anything. Everything's okay. You're in your room, 3 a.m, you can hear somebody snoring down the hall. Everything's fine. There's nothing in there, but you're still so scared. And that's the part that just really intrigues me, is how it was able to make the mind that terrified when there's nothing terrifying going on at that moment.
Well, there's some people that have reported even experiencing the sound of footsteps in their bedroom, the oppressive feeling of someone in their room, actually like standing over them. It's a super strange aspect to this phenomenon that I don't understand why it all has to relate back to fight or flight, that massive amount of fear, that dread. Why is that the thing that always seems to accompany this?
Yeah, some switch in your brain gets flipped, and it doesn't matter what kind of dream you had, you're petrified. I can't remember her name right now. Vicky Joy. I reached out to her. I heard her on someone's show. I can't remember. I think it was Kill the Mockingbirds. And so I immediately reached out to her about it, and I told her my story, and she was intrigued because she'd never heard anyone explain it the way I have, go through it the way I have. But she's probably heard just about everyone's story on sleep paralysis, and it's fascinating. It's scary. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I haven't had one in 4 or 5 years now. But I remember my first one. I remember my last one, and I remember 3 in between that all are connected. And
before you get into them, and we want to hear all of them.
Oh yeah.
Have you made an attempt to kind of dissect each of those events? Have you looked into them? Have you thought about the catalysts? What may have prompted it? What were you going through it in your life at the time? Were you under a lot of stress? This isn't. I'm not trying to nose into your personal issues, but there's some pretty lengthy articles about people who use psychoactive drugs, these becoming more prevalent with people who experiment with, mind-altering substances, both on both ends of the thing, things that are kind of speed up your system, and then things like alcohol and antidepressants that basically slow down your system. Nobody seems to be exempt from it, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right.
So, if you don't mind, let's get into might as well start with your first one. And what did we set the stage for us here?
Going back to what you said, yeah, and very possibly my last one, when I tell it, I could dissect that down to probably exactly why it happened, or what it was about. And I've thought about that recently, sort of dissecting why did I have this dream? Why did I have it then? The 3 in the middle, I couldn't tell you. They were the ones that I will refer to as fun. That I had a good time. My first one, I was 21 or 22. I believe I was 21. I knew I could buy alcohol at the time. And I worked for an automotive auto body parts delivery service. And I drove a route from Atlanta, Georgia, down to Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida, back up to Atlanta, just a box truck. did it once a month, did local deliveries in between. I'd done it many times, and I drove down there, stayed in a hotel in Mobile. And I remember I went across the street, got a 6-pack of beer, came back, turned the TV on, cracked open a beer, took a sip, laid down, and I just went out, just pow, gone. And I woke up just seconds later. I mean, it was bizarre, and I was laying on my stomach and my head was turned. I could see the TV. I could see what was going on, and I could feel something sitting on me, and I could feel the breathing on my neck, and I could see the hand next to me scraping on the bed. And it was like a skeletal hand with all the flesh kind of rotted off. And
Jesus.
And yeah, it was scary because I had no idea what was going on. And I was paralyzed, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. And like I mentioned on the AI, at some point in my life, I heard people talk about selling their soul to the devil or demonic things like that, and they always talk about it feels like while they're in the process of doing something like that, they feel a weight of something like sitting on their chest. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that came to my mind when that started happening, and I just started screaming as loud as I could. Tried to move. I was screaming, "Get off me! No, no, no!" And I finally came out of it, and I sat up in bed. I don't know for how long. I was petrified for a while. Not. I was petrified from just the normal, fear that you have coming out of it, and the fear of never having something like that happen before. And at some point, I believe I asked somebody about it, and I think they're, "Oh yeah, you have sleep paralysis." I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And they're like, "I don't know. I get it." And it's, but that was my first one, and it was quick. It was short. I've had some that were shorter that felt like they were an hour long. The brain is an amazing thing. But why that happened, I don't know. Was I tired? I was exhausted. It was in Mobile, Alabama, which is I think a kind of a highly paranormal city. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But yeah, it was probably one of the scariest ones.
So, okay. So visually, your brain was telling you that there was some other entity there. You mm-hmm. saw the hands, you saw the decomposing flesh on the bones, and
I could feel the breath.
And you could feel the breath. At this point, you were unable to move, but your mind was. Were you in a state where you believed that you were awake? Or do you believe that you do believe that you were awake?
Yeah, because I could see the TV. I could see there was news on. I remember there was news on, and they were going over a basketball game. I remember seeing the players run up and down the court, and they were talking about who won, who lost.
So having dug in afterwards, and this several years ago, obviously, why did your brain decide to show you those images?
I have no idea. I don't think there was anything really bad going on. My mother was sick, and my father was taking care of her. I don't know if she was quite gone by then, but she was pretty close. She couldn't drive. She couldn't do a lot of things for herself. Maybe, I mean, it was, it's not a good thing to watch your mother in that case, but we had seen this coming for a while. It wasn't, like we woke up one day and mom was sick, and we, everybody knew how it was going, and it was going to get worse. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I wasn't in any type of bad relationship. I probably wasn't even in a relationship then.
In your gut, in your core of your beliefs, do you think that what you saw was a hallucination? Was it produced by your mind, or is there a part of you that thinks what you saw was a legitimate manifestation of something oppressing its will on you?
In my gut, I want to say that it was my brain showing me that, because I'm a bit of a realist, and I feel like if it was something else, there would have been other clues. I would have, when I was able to move, I would have seen it move. I would have, I don't know.
Yeah,
something else.
And don't get me wrong, in no way, shape, or form am I fear mongering or trying to make something out of nothing. I'm not trying to change your belief into thinking that it was something supernatural.
Right.
I'm curious, because I've had it happen twice. The first time was very, very benign. The second time, it was of a length that was noticeable, and it got uncomfortable. And that happened just about a year ago, or within the past year. I woke up and there's some interesting things that go along with this, because this was a topic of discussion during one of our Discord lives on a Friday night a couple of weeks ago. I woke up and I could not open my mouth, yet I was screaming. And I'm fairly certain that's what woke me up. I basically woke up to the sound of myself going, could not open my mouth. And I don't know about the rest of my body, because I wasn't paying attention to my legs or my torso or anything like that. The one thing that I can tell you is that I had my left arm was stretched out across the bed, and I was, when I woke, I was on my back with my head tilted way back toward, like almost looking back towards the headboard. And I don't typically sleep on my back. I sleep on my side, or I sleep 3/4 rolled over to my stomach. So the position that I found myself when I woke was odd. I mean, nobody knows what you do during the middle of the night in your sleep, but typically that's not how I sleep. And I could not move my arm for the life of me, man. I could not move my arm, and I could not open my mouth. And I was completely aware of it, and it hit me in that moment. I was like, holy shit, this is sleep paralysis. I don't freaking like this at all. And it was a very short duration. At most 35, 45 seconds. But it was ungodly uncomfortable. And it was, I don't want to say that it like put me into fight or flight, but it was genuinely uncomfortable. It was a creepy sensation. Now, I don't recall having any kind of doom and gloom, any kind of oppressive thoughts. I didn't feel like I didn't notice that I felt like anything was sitting on me. I could not open my mouth. I mean, my jaw was open as I was trying to scream, but my lips were sealed, and they were not open at all.
Huh. Well, I know on times where I've been in paralysis and I felt like I needed to scream. It was hard to scream first few times, and eventually I think because I'm just focusing on screaming or saying something, I finally get it out. And you mentioned on your back. I mean, there was a time, and it was the time where I had my 3 craziest ones, I guess, But I could almost go into sleep paralysis on demand. If I laid on my back and I was tired, I could feel it come on.
Now, here is something that I wanted to get into, and I was hoping you were going to have something that related to it, because the deeper that I dug into some of the causes or some of the thought to be causes of sleep paralysis, is a lack of oxygen. And, now I'm a pretty good sized guy. I'm carrying more weight than I need to. Several people in my family throughout the length of time that I've kind of paid attention to it, I know have had issues with sleep apnea and have had to get the Darth Vader sounding masks, when they sleep to force oxygen. But a lack of oxygen has been one of the things that has been brought up as far as causing that trigger, that flip-flop, that switch to not go off correctly during your sleep, in your REM sleep. And, it's not looked at as a direct cause, but it is looked at as a side issue that is associated with somebody being able to fall into that sleep paralysis. And
I can see that.
Sleeping on my back, like I said, is not a normal thing for me. When I was married, I know that when I slept on my back, I'd get punched by my ex-wife and told to roll over, because I was doing the death gurgle as far as my breathing. So, I'm sure that had something to do with it, but.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I mean, it's like people who have near-death experiences. I mean, they die, the oxygen gets cut off to their brain. The brain takes over from there, or whatever happens. So yeah, I could totally see that. And I could always feel it coming on, where I would get tingling in my head, and it would kind of go down from my head through it kind of reminded me of when you have surgery and they put the IV in you and they start putting in the fluids that put you out. You can kind of feel them going through your body right before you go out. That's kind of what it felt like. And then, if I didn't move myself or didn't do anything like that, I would go right into it.
Can I ask? I'll ask this after you tell your other account, because that might tell the tale. But I'll make sure that I circle back to that, because sometimes I wonder, in this aspect of talking about sleep paralysis, but also in the a person's belief system, whether you're devoutly religious, whether you are, obsessed with watching horror movies, or whether you, a number of different things. Does your belief system play a part in what happens when you're observing the dread, just like you were talking about, your mom was sick during the time when you had your first one. Are these things that are being manifested in our brain because of our religious beliefs versus are we angry at God because he let this happen to our mom? And are we having visions of what we're afraid that loved one's going to go through? Are we imagining that, the Grim Reaper is coming to take its claim on all of us? Is it something related to your mother's illness? Is it, I wonder if our personal belief systems have anything to do with what goes on in our mind when this kicks in.
Right. I don't, as far as I go, I couldn't really make a connection there. I'm a believer. I'm not a good Christian. I am a Christian. I'm by no means a good Christian, but I don't think God wants me to be a good Christian. I think He has other plans for me. But I could see where people could use their belief system to analyze them, or something on that side. But yeah, I mean that's another good thing right there to think about is it would be interesting to talk to someone who is deeply religious, who suffers sleep paralysis, and kind of get their take on it.
Mm-hmm.
And find someone who is a 100% non-believer, get their take on it, and kind of see where things fall. That would be interesting.
Over the course of the lifetime that you've had of having sleep paralysis a number of times, I assume that you have, like you said, you reached out to the one woman that was on Kill the Mockingbirds. Have you reached out to or contacted anybody else who possibly goes through this, or have you come up with any good resources as far as the explanation behind why this is happening? Is there something specific to you, the way you handle things, the way you deal with things? Are there any things that you've kind of attributed? Okay, this is why I'm going through this. I can't change it, but at least I understand why.
Not really. I had more of an interest in it. I found it interesting that I had. I wasn't concerned. I reached out to Vicky after I heard her, just because I could tell she had a lot of knowledge on it, and I just wanted to kind of get her take on what my sleep paralysis was and what she thought of it. And what I got from her was, I'd never heard anyone go through what you've gone through. Mainly the three that are all connected, but no, they haven't really concerned me to a point where I felt I really needed to go any further than just kind of tell people what I've gone through and, just start the conversation about it. I can't really, other than my last one, I really can't, connect anything, as what was going on in my life or anyone close to me or anything like that. I just couldn't, put two and two together there.
So the three that kind of fell in the middle, you alluded to that they were, I think you used the word fun. Mm-hmm. But yet you just said they were all kind of interconnected. Can you get into that?
Yeah. Now, I think you said something about it at the beginning that, a lot of sleep paralysis, you feel it coming on and you go into it. These three were extremely vivid dreams, and I didn't realize they were sleep paralysis until I was coming out of them. And that's when they went from, fun and interesting to scary, because you just, even if whatever happened wasn't scary, you're scared anyway. Just it's I don't know how it's able to flip that switch in your mind to just have complete fear when there's no fear around, but it does. But yeah, all three of them, they started out in a house. The house was not a necessarily familiar house. There were some things familiar in a dream that were kind of familiar to where I was living at the time. I was helping take care of my father. He was sick at the time, with Parkinson's. So I was living in his house, taking care of him and somewhat taking care of my stepmother. But and it was me and several other people. We were all lined up, almost like military style in a platoon or something. We felt in a straight line, and we were all being taught how to levitate and how to move while you're levitating. And I couldn't tell you how we levitated, but we were able to get about foot and a half off the ground. Moving was you used your feet up and down, just move forward, move back. It was fun. They told us once we were levitated that to move around the house, move around outside the house, practice what you're doing. And we were told that to time travel, you have to know how to levitate. And this is your thing. You need to learn how to do this. You need to learn how to levitate. You need to learn how to move. And so the majority of the dream was moving around the house, practicing your movements while you're levitated. And we were told, don't go on the top floor, the third floor, and do not go in the room where there are two gentlemen working. And the first two, I went to the room. The last one, I went to the third floor, I guess because I couldn't listen to rules. But the room was these two guys, and each one was at a small little, almost like a school desk with a computer on it. And they were looking for, the way they explained it, they were looking for either video, online newspaper, anything that would show something bizarre happening, like, for instance, like where, there's stories of where it rained and like 1,000 fish fell out of the air, or 1,000 birds just died and fell out of the air. Things like that, because that was something that they did to triangulate by year and by place for time travel. You can always go back in time, you can go forward. But, if they had a newspaper article that, I don't know, say 1,000 fish fell out of the air and wherever, Minnesota, they could be like, okay, this happened on this date, blah, blah, blah. We remember doing that. Okay, so we can send someone to that time because we know. If they do something and it doesn't get any reporting, then they either no one saw it or fell into the ocean or whatever. They weren't able to triangulate where that was, time, place, and time. But every time you went in that room, those guys, the second they saw you, they motioned you over. They wanted to talk. They wanted they seemed like they were bored and they just needed company. And they would explain what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I'll say the entity, whoever it was that was talking to us about levitating, they always seemed really short. Maybe it's because we were so off the ground. I don't know. But they would always come in and look right at me, and the second they looked at me, I would start to wake up. And
okay, so let me ask you: first of all, I'm struck by something very familiar about the two guys in the room. That to me is, I've heard this before, and it's, make no mistake, it's not that I listened to your episode with AI. There's something very familiar about that to me, and I don't know why. I don't know why that is. But so that's a very strange dream, very, very specific dream. A lot of times people dream and there's a number of different things going on that don't seem to have any causation or effect on the other things that are going on. They all seem like a bunch of strangely chaotic thoughts that happen in people's dreams, but yours is very specific to the learning and mastering of levitation, and the topic of going back in time. So this was actually, you experienced sleep paralysis during these dreams as well, correct?
Yeah, when I was coming out is when I would feel that I couldn't move. I was scared. I couldn't talk. I couldn't scream nothing. And that was the sleep paralysis part of it, was, coming out of it and just like I said, just being absolutely petrified, and there's nothing to be scared about. And I couldn't move. I could feel the tingling in me kind of going away. And that's how I chalked it up to being sleep paralysis. But it wasn't going into one where you go into one and bizarre stuff starts happening, whether you see entities or monsters or whatever it may be. It was always coming out of it.
Now, you mentioned the word entity when you were talking about the person that was teaching you the levitation. Is that just a gut feeling that you had based on it, or did they look different?
I can say this. I know in the dream that I looked at them. I know they looked different. I know they looked short. Now, like I said, I was levitating 1.5 feet off the ground. But I don't think that they were human, or, they just seemed, I want to say like, small, like the gray aliens, but not gray. Just seemed really short.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what they looked like.
So what was the next, the continuation of that?
The next dream was pretty much exactly the same. You got to time travel, you got to levitate. And, go through the house, practice your levitation, go outside, practice, do what you got to do. And I would go into that room and talk to the guys, and I would get busted right back out of it. The third dream, I went on the 3rd floor, and that kind of reminded me of like a hayloft in a barn. And it had a door at one end. And when that door was open, it was dark, and you could see, looked like kind of like stars going by, like when you watch Star Wars and they go into warp speed and you see all the lights, go by real. That's kind of what it looks like. And I levitated over there, and as soon as I got really close to it, I got sucked out of it. That was where you went through for time travel. But I just fell, and it immediately turned into almost like a falling dream, where you're falling and then I came out of that one same way, sleep paralysis, paralyzed, couldn't move, couldn't talk, couldn't scream. And I never had another one of those after that instance.
Very strange.
So, yeah, maybe if I would have paid attention, I could try and travel now. I don't know. Obeyed the rules.
I just for
and my feet would be so sore afterwards from practicing moving around. That's why I called it fun, because it was kind of fun. Because before I went into that room, or before I went on the 3rd floor, I went out and practiced my levitation, and it was fun. It was interesting.
So you're saying that, like, during the course of your dreaming, you were actually still probably moving your feet in the direction that you were being taught how to master the.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. As you were saying that, I opened an AI program, and I inputted, is levitation associated with the potential for time travel? That was my query. And the AI returned this answer. Levitation, the ability to float or fly in the air without any physical support, is not currently associated with the potential for time travel in any scientific recognized way.
Huh.
That seems like a very strange way to end that sentence.
Right. I was kind of waiting on something else too. Another game.
That's strange.
Yeah. I didn't realize they were looking into it scientifically. But.
That's bizarre.
Well, I mean, and they told us the reason, I say they, the entity, there wasn't, other than the people learning, there wasn't anyone else demonstrating or telling us how to do it. But the reason being is if for some reason you time travel and you're somewhere where you don't need to be on the ground, say over a forest fire or over water or something like that, you need to be able to stay above it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So where are you at now with this?
As far as
what's your belief system when it comes to this?
I want to say that I'm pretty much on the side of just overactive brain. You know, you're really tired and your brain isn't tired, maybe. Now, the last one I had kind of disproves a little bit of that, maybe. I don't know. The last one, I hadn't had a sleep paralysis for a while, probably more than a year. And Dad had passed away. I was in the middle of selling the family property, which used to be bigger part of a larger piece of property, which got sold off through the years by my grandfather. And I was the last one in the family to have the property. I was the executor of the will, and I could either buy out my brother and sister or just sell it all. I held on to it. I've been surrounded by neighborhoods. I didn't want it. So I was the last one, and I got a lot of, I don't know, hatred from some of the family, sort of who are you to be the one to be the last one to sell this? You know, who are you to be the one to be in charge of all this? And it was, aunts and uncles and things like that. And it pissed me off, but it didn't get me down too much. With anything, I would never put being executor of an estate on anyone. That is hard.
Just went through that myself.
I mean, my brother doesn't talk to me anymore because I wouldn't give him his money fast enough. Just stuff like that. It just gets in the way of everything. But I was still at the house. I was getting ready to move out. I just bought me a house, and I was laying in the bed on my back. My arm was stretched out. There was a lady beside my bed, kneeled down. She had a hold of my hand and she was rubbing it. She was telling me everything is going to be okay. And I was screaming, "Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you?" And I finally woke myself up, and I realized that it was my mother. She had passed away 19 years before that.
Oh, wow.
But it was a younger version of her, but it was her because I'd seen plenty of pictures of her when she was young.
When she was in her prime.
Yes. And that was bizarre. That hit me kind of hard. That, it just, during the dream, I didn't know who it was. Just, who the hell are you? Why are you in my room? And then I come out of it and it's like, bam, that was Mom.
Yeah, that's powerful. I've talked to several people. I've talked to a number of people who
you've been through something similar.
Yeah. Who have been visited in dreams by a loved one who was deceased. I mean, without getting a pad of paper out and jotting them down, I would have to say the vast majority of them being a parental figure. But many times they appear in what right off the bat you don't recognize them because they are not in the most current of. They don't look like what you remember them when they passed. It is most likely a younger version of them when they were in their when they were in their prime. And I mean, I know that's kind of jarring, but at the same time, what an amazing gift.
Yeah.
For you to have gotten that at a time where you obviously needed to hear it as well because of the stuff you were going through. Wow.
Yeah, when I remember waking up, I didn't have to go to work that day. I woke up and it was 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. It was daylight outside. It was a nice day. And it just, I sat in bed for probably an hour, just going over and over in my head what just happened. And, just crazy. Yes. But yeah, it was, I went and found as many old pictures as I could find of Mom and just looked at them. And, I couldn't pick out one picture that was her then, but I could pick out enough to, that kind of put her around the age of maybe 25 or so. Her hair was longer at the time and whatnot. But yeah, it was something else. I mean, if that's just our brain telling us that, or if it's actual visitation, it's
either way. I still look at it as a gift.
Yeah.
Because you may be very well right. You may be spot on with that being our brain giving us what we need at that time,
mm-hmm.
whether we realize it or not, wow. Yeah. Any other kind of, anything you would consider to be, out of the norm in your life, any kind of paranormal experiences?
I have never had anything happen to me, and I am a believer. I mean, I am dying to see a UFO, or I sat on the beach at Cape San Blas, Florida one time, 3 days, on and off, just sitting in my chair at night, fishing, looking up at the sky, going, something happened. And there's a military base right by there, so you see all kinds of crazy stuff up there, but it can all be explained. But no, I've tried to get myself creeped out, and I used to have a little gig with my ex-wife where we go clean out these hoarder houses, and oh, cool, maybe I'll go into this one, and something weird will happen. Nothing. So I mean, and my aunt lived next door, and several family members had died in that house, and I've been over there many times, been over there by myself many times, nothing.
Yeah. Mom
died in my house. Only thing that happened then, or Dad in my dad's house, only thing that happened was that last instance with the dream.
That was in that house.
That was in that house. She died in that house. Bedroom right below me. And nothing. I don't know. Now I did have one sleep paralysis that I like to mention, just because it's just kind of bizarre but interesting. Is when I was married, and me and the wife were laying in bed. She was sitting up reading a book. I was watching TV, and outside the window there was a street light along the street in the neighborhood, and it was far enough away it didn't really shine in the window or anything, but I remember looking at it, and when I looked at it, I went into sleep paralysis, and I felt like I was being sucked into it, and I just started screaming. It's just moving, screaming, everything I can do to get out of it. So I'm like, oh, fuck this, and I come out of it, and I look over at my wife, and I'm like, did you hear that? She goes, no, I didn't. You were just laying there. And I look at the TV, and the same commercial was still on. And I felt like it was at least 20 minutes of struggle. And I thought that was interesting. They say your dreams, can feel like they're extremely long, only happen for a few seconds or something like that.
Now I'm going to ask you this. it never dawned on me at all during the conversation. But could you be prone to narcolepsy? Have you had periods in your life or instances in your life where you just like, boom, and you're out? You don't remember falling asleep. You don't remember laying down to fall asleep, but boom, you're asleep and then come out of it.
No. I mean, I've had times where I've been really tired and fell asleep really fast, but no, I know someone who has it, and I know what you're talking about. I've never.
I wonder if narcolepsy, if there's a component of that plays a part in these types of dreams.
It could be.
Because this is a little off topic, but it's on topic of narcolepsy. A few years ago, and when I first decided to do the show called Uncomfortable, I as a middle-aged adult male who is found himself back into dating and all that goes along with that, I really wanted to do an episode, but it certainly doesn't fit this show. But I really wanted to do an episode on the truly screwed up first dates that I've been on. The truly bizarre and the things that you have to put yourself through in an attempt to find somebody to spend time with again at this age and during this time. A couple of years ago, I had met a woman on a dating site, and we had agreed to meet on a Sunday afternoon, much like today. So I suggested that we meet at a local brewery who had an amazing Sunday afternoon buffet. And their buffet was literally everything that was on their menu served in a tapas style, small portions, but you could literally get everything that was on their menu for $15.99. So I pulled into the parking lot. I was about 10 minutes early. And at about 10 minutes after, I'm still sitting in the parking lot. And I sent her a message and said, "I'm here. Are you here yet?" And she said, "Nope, I'm running late. And you better get used to it." And I was like, not starting off good. So I contemplated leaving, and I was like, hell, I got nothing else going on, so I'll just stick it out. So she ends up getting there. She was a half hour late, which is rude. And then to call me out and tell me I better get used to it. You're making some pretty good assumptions there, sweetheart. So we went in. Nice looking lady. Nothing physically unattractive about her. I was still put off by the fact that she was late and really didn't give two shits about it. We sat down, and the waiter came up to the table, and he handed us the menu, and he asked us if we wanted anything to drink. We were at a brewery. They make their own beer. I suggested, let's just get a flight, and if you like any of them, you can get one. If not, that's fine. So I ordered a flight, and then she asked me, what do they have that's good here? And I said, I'd been there several times before, and I'd never had a bad meal. So I would suggest, since it was Sunday, get the buffet for $15.99, and you can try everything and you can have more of what you do like and none of what you don't like. And she continued to look at the menu, and she was really struggling. She was, like, oh, I don't know. What should I get? And I was like, again, why don't you get the buffet? Because you can try literally everything that they have here. And finally, the waiter comes back for the third time, and she's like, I guess I'll try the buffet. And I was like, yeah, make that 2, please. So we got up, we went and we got a couple of dishes, came back to the table and sat down, and she immediately bowed her head. And I was like, oh, okay. She's going to say a prayer before she eats. Now, I have no problem with that.
Right.
But in a situation that is out in public, and to be as obvious about it as she was, I thought it was a little dramatic. Kind of maybe almost looking for attention. But it's your thing. Do your thing, right? And after a minute, I was like, man, she's going all in. She's got a lot to say. She's got a lot to say. Maybe this is a confession as well. And the waiter comes back by the table and says, how's everything? And then he notices her with her head down, and he looks at me, and I was like, I shook my head. I was like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And I said her name, and she didn't react. And I said her name again, and she didn't react. And the waiter was like, is she okay? And again, I shook my head. I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. And he's like, should I call somebody? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, and you could tell he was confused because we were together. And I'm like, dude, this is a first date. I never met her before. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, he stopped and he kind of bent over and he was looking at her and he's like, well, her chest is moving, so she's breathing. And I was like, oh my God, what in the hell is going on? And finally, I just, after, 3-4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. I mean, it went on for a while. I mean, I was trying to be very respectful of the fact that I thought she was praying there for the longest time. But then I just slammed my hand onto the table and she popped up and she looked at me and she's like, what? And I said, what? I said, where the hell have you been? I said, you've been sleeping or you've passed out or something. And she's like, no, I didn't. And I said, no, you really did. I said, the waiter's been by here like 3 times. I said, the last time he wanted to, and here he comes. He's walking down with the manager of the brewery. And I stopped him like midway. I put my hand up and I was like, no, it's okay. And she's like, no, I didn't. And I was like, yeah, you most certainly did. And she was very adamant that she had not fallen asleep. And I said, well, were you aware of anything that was going on? And she's like, nothing's going on. And I'm like, oh man. And then I start wondering to myself, it's like, are you self-medicated? Are you, did you maybe take more of something than you should have? But I think at the end of the day, I think it was complete and total narcolepsy. But the fear I had was that she wasn't aware that she had it, or she was just completely denying it because she was embarrassed by it. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, but I've always wanted to do an episode of because that's only one of a heaping handful of really bizarre dates that I've had since I re-entered being a single man. Again, not on topic with what I usually typically talk about on the show, so I'll stay away from it on that.
Dealt with narcolepsy once, and my best friend who's passed away now, me, him, and his cousin went on a fishing trip down in Florida, and we're sitting in the condo and we're watching the game, and we're all just drinking beer, and his cousin just all of a sudden they're just sitting there just chatting, and all of a sudden just gone. I'm looking, I'm like, what the hell? And my friend's like, oh, he's got narcolepsy. Watch this. And my friend just kicks him, and he goes, you're spilling your beer. And he pops up, and he's like, oh, okay, starts drinking. They start talking. Next thing, pow, gone again. This happens 5 or 6 times. I get up and go do something else. I'm like, oh my God, this is
that's my only experience with it. And I mean, I really hope that I hope it's as simple as that. I hope it wasn't that she was, self-medicating or something like that. I don't know. It was truly bizarre, and I'm fairly certain that the wait staff there was about to have a heart attack, because I really think the guy thought that the woman had died in her chair until he noticed that she was still breathing. But
wow.
Well, Joel, listen, I appreciate you reaching out to me. I thank you for listening to the show. It's good to have you as a part of the Uncomfortable family, and I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It was awesome. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had more. They just, after that last one with my mother, they ended. I never had another one after that.
And maybe there's a significance to that.
Yeah.
I mean, your first one started, you said she was already sick when you had your first one. And maybe that was the last part of the story that you needed, was getting visited by her. And, I'm not necessarily asking you to get into it, but, emotionally, maybe that gave you some closure, and you're able to move on past that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I try to chalk that last one down as a good thing. The first one and the ones in the middle, they all had their little place in my head that I've always remembered them. I guess I always will.
Yeah. And
then that last one, it was a good thing. It's, unfortunately, no matter what happens in sleep paralysis, they're scary. They're all scary. And it's just whatever happens in your brain. I don't know, that light switch that gets flipped, that just turns you just straight fear.
Yeah. And I suppose that's a natural thing if you are able to realize that, if you become cognizant of the fact that you cannot move, and that you're basically laying there completely at the mercy of anything that could, the wildest things in your imagination, you could do nothing about.
Yeah.
Because you have no control. So, maybe that's just one of the components to it, why we feel that fear.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, that's, other than that, I think I have a relatively boring life. I don't know. I just got done writing a small book about my life as a chef. So if anybody wants to look it up, they can. Well, yeah, I'd
definitely plug that.
I'm writing a bigger one. But this one it's a Kindle. It's only 42 pages. It's just some funny stories and some, my take on some certain things, and everyone who's read it thought it was pretty funny. It was done quickly. There's some misspelling and everything else, but I had it done in 6 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I'm writing a bigger one that's going to have a lot more info in it, a lot more hilarious situations. But if you look up my name on Amazon, it'll come up. It's a 30-year culinary trip, and I believe that's what it's I did it so quick I can't remember the name of it, but it was something like a 30-year culinary trip in the industry and things you can learn from my mistakes. And I had some, I tied a note to a balloon one time that was found in 2 states away, and saying I was being held hostage by the chef at the country club, and how that was investigated by the the GBI and right after Columbine.
Did you get in trouble for that?
I was on PTO when they found it. They didn't know who did it until I got back, and somebody started talking about it, and I was like, "Oh, they found the balloon," and they're like, "It was you." Bunch of crazy stories like that. But yeah, look up my name, Joel Pharr, on Amazon, and
Pharr, correct?
Pharr. If you live in Georgia, like the road, Pharr. Yeah, I think it's $2.99. Leave me a review. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Right. There's a British sitcom called Chef. I want to say it came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's really funny. Really, especially if you're in the business, it's even because they take a lot of things over the top. But I want to say it was 2 seasons. But that's worth catching. It's on I think it's on BritBox. If you download that app. But yeah, it's hilarious. Even if you're not in the business, it's still really, really funny. Yeah, it's an interesting career for sure. Yeah. Hopefully on my way of making a plan to get out. I think I've done my time. Need to find something else to do.
Joel, thank you so much. Again, his name is Joel Pharr, Pharr. His book is on Amazon, and I appreciate being with me, man. I appreciate taking the time and telling us about your sleep paralysis and the thoughts behind it.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
All right, sir.
Yep.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing from Joel. The topic is something that is still very odd to me. I know a lot of people put some supernatural or paranormal occurrence to the event of having sleep paralysis. I'm just not sure. I'm not sold myself. But give this guy some love. If you're interested in his book, head over to Amazon and take a look at that. Again, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, both at uNcomfortable Podcast 65. If you have a story or an experience that you would like to have aired on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. Make sure to share the show in any way you can. That's what grows a podcast like this. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your coworkers. That's the main things you can do to help continue to grow this show and get it out in front of more people that will love what we're doing. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next week. And as always, stay uncomfortable, my friends.